fans, and welcome to this latest edition of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. As I'm sure you can tell, I am not Carruthers, I am Bice, but I am here with Carruthers, who is our communication manager at MotoAmerica. So let's start off by talking to Paul. Paul, how's it going today?
Yeah, it's going good. You know, new year, fresh start, all that stuff that goes out the window after about 6 days. But so far, so good. No, I'm excited. It's going to be a great year for MotoAmerica. You know, we've talked about it before, but we really had an outstanding year this past year in difficult times. So if we can get the rest of the stuff straightened out, I anticipate just you know, we keep getting better and things will get better, and we'll have a wonderful season. It's, you know, it's funny. I'm doing some work on updating some bios for the website, and really, when you look at the coming season, and so far I've only been focusing on Superbike, but I mean, I think if you asked 10 people who they thought was going to be a MotoAmerica Superbike champion in 2021, you might get 5 or 6 different answers. So it's kind of exciting to look at it that way. You know, when I'm doing these bios, none of these guys have a ton of podiums. None of them have a ton of wins. They're all like kind of almost at the same level, so to speak. And then they're all going to meet here in a few months at COTA and get the thing started. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really unpredictable season with a lot of guys winning races. So cool.
Yeah, it'll be here before we know it. It's going to be great. You know, it's funny, the other day we were both looking at our compilation of, you know, our podcast for the last year, and it's funny to look at it and see, you know, 52 weeks in a year, and we did 52 podcasts last year. So we're pretty good. We never missed a single week, no matter holidays or anything else going on. So I'm glad we're pretty consistent about it and keep it going, because, you know, I'm OCD about that stuff. I don't like to miss anything. But I'm excited for this week to have a guest who we've never had on before, and we've been wanting to have on for quite a while. And it's well, first I'll say his name. It's Richard Stanboli, who's the team owner of the Attack Performance team, but also the owner of Attack Performance, which is a company that manufactures all kinds of components for sport bikes and really all kinds of motorcycles. But he researches and develops those parts and everything. And one of the things I want to say about you, Richard, is there are a lot of people in our paddock that are involved in racing for various reasons. I mean, I always think of Westby Racing. Obviously, Craig Westby's involved in racing because of his love of the sport and continuing a tribute to his son, Dane. And other manufacturers get involved for proof of concept. And I'm talking OEMs like motorcycle manufacturers, but then there are people like you who have a love for the sport, but also you prove and develop your products in our paddock and sell those products to either track day people, racers out there, or, you know, street riders. But it's kind of our series is proof of concept, and it's cool reason for you to be involved, and you've been involved for a very long time in our series. So welcome on our podcast, Richard.
Yeah, glad to be here, and thanks for that introduction.
Richard, I've got a question for you. You know, Sean just did a pretty good job of talking about the things that you do and the reasons why you do them. But you're so involved, as you have been in all your teams, but now with the official Yamaha team in the MotoAmerica series. You're really busy, and you've got your hands in a lot of different things. And one of the questions that comes to mind, and it's kind of funny because I don't think I've actually even asked my dad this, and I probably should. But what part of all this do you enjoy the most? Is it making the parts? Is it like interacting with the riders? Is it doing the data work on a laptop? Is it the competition? Is it winning? Is it kicking people's ass? Is it going to the podium and celebrating with the team? What is it that really stokes the fire with Richard Stanboli?
Yes.
All of the above.
It's the whole thing, right? So yeah. Probably if I had to go least important, probably, which I should probably be a little better at it, but the podium celebration stuff doesn't really turn me on so much as it is to see the product, see it develop and basically go from concept to the racing, and you see it win. I think that's probably the most important thing. The rider interaction, of course, the crew interaction, everything is clicking. It feels really well. really good. So I think the teamwork, the product on the racetrack are the most important things. The podium celebration, all that kind of stuff. You have to do without it. So if they didn't have a podium at all, I wouldn't miss it.
Wouldn't either.
Yeah. I'm always pushing everybody else up there. You go get that team trophy. You go get that team trophy. So I think we cycled all of our guys through there twice this year, unfortunately, with Cameron smashing everyone, But I think, like you said, it's going to be a little more exciting next year with the riders. A lot of them are equal caliber. We may find some surprises somewhere in there, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Hey, Richard, one of the things I want to do is go back a little bit, and you've been involved in our sport for a long time. You've developed your own bike for the CRT teams and MotoGP, but before that, you were involved in our paddock, whether it was AMA Pro Racing or AMA Superbike. Talk about the number of riders that you've had a huge list of riders. You worked with a lot of different people. Can you who was the first rider you worked with? I don't really know that.
Paul Harrell.
Paul Harrell. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. 1993. Or it might have been 92 for the first run. And that was when we were at Willow Springs. He bought a Muzzy bike and smashed the smithereens. And then he bought a Suzuki, and then Chuck Graves was helping him with some stuff on it. And he had a mechanic who liked to leave all the stuff loose. He had a big crash, and we finally hooked up. And he came to our shop at that time, and we built him a bike and started winning with it. And so we went to the AMA National, started doing Superbike. This kind of was our start.
So you had a shop before you actually started getting involved in racing. That's correct?
Yeah, I mean it's a long story, but yeah, pretty much.
And were you manufacturing components then, even back then?
More fabrication, like old school skills. I was like making stuff. When I was in high school, they had metal shop and auto shop and all the shops they don't have nowadays,
Right.
Everything's more computer skills and, probably have a course on social media. I don't know. But for us, it was, make parts out of metal, weld things together. So I kind of took that the next step when I got involved in the motorcycle industry. I mean, I'm an engineer by trade, so it all kind of went together. I like making stuff. Mm.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this year, because obviously you were, I don't want to say thrown in the deep end, because you knew how to swim and you wanted to be thrown in that deep end. So it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but your performance, the team's performance over the course of the year, I don't know if you found that surprising or not, but some people in the paddock may have been surprised by the actual complete dominance that the team showed in finishing first and second in the championship. Was that what you expected? Was it a surprise to do as well as you guys did, or were you ready? I mean, you thought that was going to be the way it was?
I was pretty confident it was going to be a 1-2, maybe a 1-3, let's say, because Jake was his first year on our motorcycle. But Cameron had so much experience with the Yamaha R1. It was just a matter of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together for him and just going the next step. When we were given this opportunity by Yamaha, it was basically, here you go. No, they didn't have any restrictions. So it's like, do what you do best. Just don't mess up, basically. And so we took that, and the reason why we didn't mess up is we went and tested and made sure that we had all of our tools ready. And I think COVID might have caught out some of the teams that may have not been so diligent with going to the racetrack and making sure all their items were ready to go. So a lot of times, the other guys were maybe testing a little more at the racetrack than they probably should have been. So no, I wasn't too surprised by that. It kind of turned out the way we had planned, luckily.
Richard, I want to ask you something. So actually, I put a story on the website today because when I knew we were having you on, I got to thinking about fasteners, and I have a deep-seated hatred for Phillips head screws because you can't take them out without ruining them, and that's what the story is about. I prefer Allen bolts because they're more precise. But along those lines, one of the things that drives me nuts about a motorcycle is most motorcycle crankcases have a sight glass on them, and they've got those two lines. And I remember I used to talk to Steve Rounds about this at Yamaha. When they put oil in the engine, it's like Which one of those, is it right in the middle? Is it towards the top line, towards the bottom line? And I'm asking you this because I know it had something to do with, in the beginning of the year, there seemed to be something going on that kept bringing Cameron in, and you guys doing something with the oil. So can you kind of respond to that whole thing? And why is there a range in that stupid sight glass?
Okay, so we were using a kit pan, and we found that Cameron was braking so deep with a new configuration. And we had this kind of similar problem with our CRT bike when we first went. Back then it was basically Kawasaki World Superbike engine. Mm-hmm. And what happened was all the oil would go to the front of the engine on the brakes, and we'd lose a little bit of oil pressure. So the only way to combat that with the system that we had was to add oil. So it was a fine line between how much oil we needed to have in the engine versus how much got up in the airbox when the engine was pressurized on those long straightaways. So that combination of stuff, it was just seemed to be just a little bit of the wrong combination between oil level and engine braking performance. Not engine braking performance, but actually braking performance and how much the oil would be uncovered from the pickup. So we ended up having to run quite a bit of oil at MotoAmerica, and it only happened on Cameron's bike because he was braking so deep and so consistent, so hard. And so we came back to shop after that. We built some baffles for the pan system and took care of that problem. As far as the window, the sight glass, I mean, it's super important that you have that in the right area. On most of these bikes nowadays, especially guys who are going out and doing wheelies and stoppies and all those kinds of things, it's so easy to uncover that pickup. And as soon as that pickup sucks a little bit of air, basically your engine's done. It takes literally no time any air goes across that bearing to wipe out a bearing. So we're pretty careful about that. We're always looking at the oil pressure. And some guys, maybe they just run it too high. I think you saw it in 19 with the Westy bikes when they actually got black flag Dakota.
Yes. Because
that was a similar case where they added a little too much oil to the engine and things started smoking on the brakes coming off the back straightaway, long straightaway. And Matt is pretty hard on the brakes. Like he knows how to use the brakes on that motorcycle. He's a pretty strong brake guy. I'd say comparable with Cameron. And so that's where you end up with those long braking zones from 6th to 1st. Similar with MotoAmerica, especially turn 5 where it's all downhill. That's when you can hurt an engine. You have to be really careful about how much oil you have. So that knowing how much oil you have in the engine is pretty important. After we went back and baffled the engine and came up with a CC amount that was exactly right, we haven't had a problem since.
Yeah, it's like it was there and then it wasn't at all. And it seemed like it was something where, okay, once you figure it out, the nice thing about it is it's a specific measurement that you can, is a repeatable thing, obviously. So you won't have the problem.
Yeah. We build the engines, we put X amount of CCs in there and we wire them shut and that's it for the life of the engine. You know, if they start showing a little bit of fallout pressure, then we'll pop it open and add 100 CCs or something. That's about it. You know, that's for the life of the engine. For the most part, it's sealed from our engine room all the way back to teardown.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask you about one of the things I wondered about this year compared with last is it seemed, I guess maybe you could say you didn't really have a lead rider and a backup rider, but I think we all know that Cameron was probably your lead rider and Jake was new to the team. So naturally, the progression with these things tends to be Cameron left the team to go to Moto 2, so Jake would be the heir apparent to be the #1 rider, but maybe that's not the case because now you have Josh Herron on the team who's raced for you before and is back involved in the team. So in terms of the makeup of the team, and you worked with Cameron, whereas you had a crew that worked with Jake, and I know you worked with everybody on the team, I get that, but I'm just saying kind of in specific roles. Is it the case where you've kind of assumed Jake is your rider, or are you going to be more focused on Herron? And how is your team made up this year compared to last?
Well, we never really had a lead rider per se. So it wasn't like one guy would get this motorcycle and the other guy would get another motorcycle and this guy would get the development parts first or something like that. Both riders had the exact same machines and they had the exact same engines and the exact same electronics. So it was up to the riders and the crew to develop that machine to satisfy the rider's technique, let's say. And so the reason why Jake ended up second was because that particular crew still had a little bit of learning to do. So did Jake. But this year we kind of changed the crew up. We brought in a little bit more experience, let's say, with some of the higher technology. So we brought in John Cornwell to be Jake's crew chief, and then also Darren Marshall, who's been involved with motorcycle electronics for many years now, and worked with a number of factories to do his electronics at the racetrack. But he also will be in charge of electronics overall before we get there. So what there is with electronics is there's a basic setting, which both bikes get, and then there's some trimming to do on that when you get to the racetrack. It's almost like having a kit box. Let's say if you're able to get in the back end of the kit box, you have the base settings that let's say Yamaha puts in the kit box, and then there's all the trims. When we get to the racetrack, all we work on is the trims for the most part, unless we run into trouble. So then it's up to each respective side to trim the bikes the way they would like for the riders. This guy might need a little more engine braking here. The other guy might need a little more power there, a little more wheelie cut or something like that. So those are all basic trims that we go through and use. So the more homework we do here at the shop, the easier it is for us at the racetrack. So I don't know, that's a long answer for your question, but there's no real lead rider or second rider. I think it's up to the riders to perform at whatever their best level is, and how it plays out through the season.
Okay, speaking of the riders, let's talk about them for a little bit. Obviously, you've had Herron in the past, and you've had Gagne for a second year because you had him last year. Comparing those two guys, from the outside looking in, and just from knowing them as well as I do, it seems like you've got two very different personalities there. Having worked with both of them before, from the outside looking in, I would think like a task with Herron would be to keep him on track and focused. Whereas I see with Gagne, it might be an opposite thing of actually trying to light a fire under him because he's so laid back. Is there any truth to that, or am I totally off base?
Did you say, Jake, we had to light a fire underneath him?
Yeah, he just seems from the outside like he's so chill and everything. And don't get me wrong, I know the guy wants to win, but is there ever a time when you need to step in and get him a little more fired up, or does that take care of itself once he starts racing?
If you ask Jake, I think I told him to chill out on the racetrack every single weekend.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
The guy rides it like an animal. I think that Jake learning how to smooth out and be subtle with a motorcycle is his biggest task this year.
Right.
And those are the same mandates that John and Marshall have. So I think it's the opposite of his persona off the bike. Yes, he is laid back and cool, but man, that dude is like, a serial killer when he gets on a motorcycle.
Right.
So it's a completely opposite thing where I think Josh is maybe he's not so focused off the racetrack. He's kind of a jokester, this and that, but I think he's pretty serious when he puts his visor down. And I saw that working with him. Maybe I just bring that out of him. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty serious about the task we have. So maybe that brings a serious side out of him as well.
Yeah, it is funny about Jake because he does have a persona, but some of these guys, they have some burning desire. I know when we talked with we've done some podcasts. We did an episode with Ben Bostrom and with Eric Bostrom, and we think of Ben as being so laid back too, and Eric would always say he's the most competitive guy he's ever been around. He just wants to win everything. And that's pretty good coming from Eric Bostrom, who used to race for you, Richard, and is a highly competitive guy. So some of these guys, you don't really see what that burning passion is outwardly until they put that face shield down, I guess. Would you say that's correct?
I think so. I never saw Jake being super happy about finishing second last year. I didn't see him as being super happy about finishing second in the championship either. So I know he has that desire. And I know from looking at his data, when you look at somebody's data, you almost look into their brain, how they're riding, where the fear is and where there's no fear. And I'm telling you, Jake has no fear on the motorcycle whatsoever. the stuff he does with it, you're going, how does that thing stay on two wheels? And sometimes it didn't, you know. But I think he might surprise some people this year if we can get him to calm down a little bit in some areas.
One of the things I want to talk to you about, Richard, you had mentioned to me yesterday when we were setting up for this show that you had told me about Jonathan Cornwell, who everybody knows is, well, most people know as a 250 two-stroke rider and a good one from Canada, was a champion and worked for Öhlins for a long time. And, you know, I've seen his crew chiefing abilities, even with Matthew Skoltz working with that team. You can see him. He would get right up in Matthew's face and kind of talk to him quite a bit. So it makes sense that he would make that transition to be a crew chief. And of course, Darren Marshall's from Nova Scotia. So you've got a sudden Canadian influx. We talked about this yesterday, and you mentioned the fact that it's better than having a bunch of Australians like you used to. And I let Paul know, who is Australian.
Yeah.
So I want Paul and you to talk about, like, what you have a thing against Australians. Is that right?
Maybe the particular ones I had.
There you go. Good save.
I'm told there's other versions of Australians.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know, Paul. At 5 o'clock, are you running over to the pub or what?
No. Well, that's why I needed to hurry up because I got to be there at 11:30.
That's right.
He was cracking open a six-pack just a minute ago. I don't know if you heard it in the background.
I think there's a stereotype, you know,
Yes.
about Aussies, just like there's a stereotype about drunk Russians and things like that. And then when you actually meet a wide variety of them, the stereotype doesn't fit. But I for sure had the one stereotype.
All right, good.
Another thing I want to talk to you about, Richard, is one of the things that surprises me. I think this is probably not something that you haven't heard before, but you tend to be a type of person that you got to approach you with a little bit of caution until you come up and start talking. And you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is just a terrific human being. He's very conversive. He's not as scary as I thought he was. And from that point of view, with all the development you're doing and all the manufacturing, you don't seem to be as secretive as I would have thought you were. And in fact, you have made it so another Yamaha team with some notoriety, Westby Racing, it's not as siloed with the Yamaha teams as it had been in the past. You have seemed to have extended an olive branch, or maybe you've been able to put up with Chuck Giacchetto coming in your truck. But the question I have is, you don't seem to have a problem sharing trade secrets a little bit to a certain extent. And is it because it helps all ships rise? I mean, where are you at with that?
You know, it's a fine line between support and giving away everything.
Right.
Especially with a rider like Matt, who's more than capable. So we have to be careful about what we share. But yes, we do support Westby Racing. As a matter of fact, him being in our truck, I guess he'll be in our truck permanently next year because he's using our second semi. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to see that. I wanted to see the paddock grow, and especially the Yamaha product. So yes, we consider ourselves the Yamaha support team, since we are, closely connected to the guys at Yamaha US. And so with that said, we'll help out just about anyone. And there's a couple of guys building Yamahas as well for Superbike. And so we're giving them a bunch of information, like for instance, a complete start map straight off of Cameron's bike for those guys to start every single round, and they can tune off of that. Like we're saying, the base setting, they have to sign an NDA, promise not to share, but they'll get really good settings straight away, so they'll be able to go out and get competitive. I mean, we want to have good racing. With Cameron there last year, smashing everyone, it made it kind of boring in the P1 spot, but there was still some good racing in P2, 3. Hopefully we'll have good racing across the board this time, and we'll do our part. We're not afraid to share. Plus, we sell our product, everything we race. You can buy one of our Superbikes if you wanted to.
Mm. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, to let you know, I was scared of him until this year.
When I'm at the racetrack, I'm pretty serious. I don't like being distracted from the job, but we're there to have fun as well. But it is a job, so it's like somebody coming into your office in the middle of work and, hey man, can I talk to you for a minute? I'm right in the middle of something right now.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, well, you happened to mention Cameron, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about him because you obviously worked with him last year, and as we mentioned and you mentioned, it was a dominating season where he ended up winning a 5th championship, and then now he's off to Moto 2. He's a really talented kid in a lot of different things. You know, there's not much you can do with him where you'll beat him, and that's from video games to riding bicycles to whatever. So he's obviously talented and very competitive. What do you see in him that makes him as special as he is?
It's the whole package. It's really, really strange. Like, he is super mellow off the bike as well, but man, that dude paces and is nervous before every single race. And you see him walking back and forth, pacing, and then he'll ask the same question like 10 times. So should we run that tire? Do you think we should run that tire? Yeah, we're going to run that tire. Are you sure you don't want to use that tire? I'm sure we're not going to use that tire. You know, I mean, so he's no different than any other rider, but has a lot of talent, and so he's combined that with the skills as well. And so I think he's going to do really well in the World Championship. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, riders I've ever worked with, and I've worked with Ben Spies too. So I think he's comparable with that, and we'll just see how aggressive he is. I think it just might be a matter of him flipping the aggression switch when he gets to actually race in Moto 2. I think that's the only thing that he'll have to learn. When Chaz Davies rode on our team, he was super talented, super precise, not super aggressive. But when he got to World Supersport, man, that switch went off, and the guy was super aggressive. And same in World Superbike. So I think that'll change with Cameron when he gets to mix it up with those guys over there.
You know, since Paul mentioned Cameron, I want to ask you about somebody else who I occasionally talk to these days. Oh my gosh, it sounds like I'm name dropping again. I don't like to be the guy that does that. Sorry, but I think, huh?
Too late.
Yeah, now I feel like an idiot. Okay, well, anyway, let me ask you about this guy because it was early days. You had him as a rider before a lot of good things happened to him, but it's Ben Spies. I mean, what was it like to have him on the team? And he was pretty young then, wasn't he?
Yeah, he didn't know anything. You know, he absolutely knew nothing. It was pretty. He was like a blank sheet of paper, and we just kind of he was on our team only 1 year. They went to Yoshimura and then won a championship. So I think we gave him kind of the nuts and bolts of things. And then once he got to Yosh, he was able to piece it all together and get his fitness up and all that kind of stuff, you know. And so on our team, I think he just learned about what data did and what different settings did and all those kinds of things. It was like preschool for racers, I guess. You know, but the guy is super talented. I mean, obviously, and it's too bad he got injured and ended his career that way. But I think he could have been in the sport for a long, long time.
Well, you know, the other thing about that, Richard, is you say he didn't know anything, and it sounds like he knew some more stuff after he left your team, but he had to have some interest in it. So you didn't just force that down his throat. He must have had been a little bit like a sponge on that team with you, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he didn't know anything about riding. He just didn't know anything about the technical aspects of the motorcycle.
Right.
So he was able to take that talent he had. I mean, he was a super talented kid. You know, some of the best I've seen for a kid. I remember his first race against us at Daytona. He finished second to Pridmore, and he raced with him the whole entire race. And like, wow, that kid's really good. And the next year we had him on the bike, you know. So it was pretty fun to have him on the team for sure. He was a good kid to work with at the time, now an adult. But yeah, it was just a matter of him using his riding skills and going, oh, if I did this, that's what happens. And oh, that's what those settings do. You know, then he was able to put all those things together.
Well, so speaking of some of those technical aspects that he learned, I'm going to open a Pandora's box here a little bit, but in the past, I've made some reference to the fact that before the days of fuel injection, you know, it sort of was a black art with tuning carburetors and jetting. And I know you've done a lot of that in your career as well, because you go back that far.
I don't miss any of it.
I know, exactly. It's so great to have a map that you can change, but with that in mind, you know, I think I know what you're going to say here, but is the advent of electronics, traction control, engine braking, well, and then fuel injection is related to electronics as well, but is all that, all that's good for our sport, right? I mean, it's made it better. It's made the sport more interesting and exciting.
I think for sure it's made it safer. I mean, when's the last time you saw a MotoAmerica guy high side, unless it was like an inertia slide going into a corner, you know, like with Cameron, I think he did a high side, low side type thing at Indy in that last corner because he turned so deep, he just flipped the back end around.
Well, Jake had that big one in New Jersey, though. I mean, he kind of went over that thing. That was weird too. So,
who's that?
Jake Gagne when it was.
Oh,
wet.
well, that was because he had that psycho killer mentality in that semi-wet track.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was the same kind of thing. It was a momentum slide. You can't fix those. He came out of one corner. What happened was one corner had a wet patch in it or a wet stream going across, and people would kind of stand it up, go across that, and then they would turn left into the next corner. But what happened as the session went on, the water kept getting further and further and further into the next corner because the guys would run over that patch and they would drag the water into the next corner. So he was like the fastest guy on the racetrack, going like a lunatic basically. And then he turned right through the thing, flicked it hard to the left and high-sided. And that was from flicking the bike. It's kind of like what Cameron did in Indy. It wasn't from, let's say, the traction control not catching it, because there's no way you can catch that. That's just the momentum of the motorcycle. You can't stop that. But it's pretty hard nowadays to see a guy high-side even in the wet with the traction control, because the traction control catches everything, So I think it makes, different than what people think. I think it makes the racing closer. As long as the bikes have a base setting, which is a decent place, and I think the manufacturers are getting better at providing those base settings. We had Thomas Aseo. He's our new sponsor from Fresh and Lean, title sponsor. We had his bike on the dyno, and we were tuning the kit box, and I haven't spent much time with the latest version of the kit box because it's been so into the Morelli, and it's just amazing what they offer now inside a normal box you can buy for $800 or $900. It's crazy. I mean, they have all the torque settings. You can pick the torque settings, and you can tell how much saturation, which is like the peak horsepower you want, or the torque, and how the torque comes on, and you can pick all these things, a combination of it, and with pretty few keystrokes and pretty easy to do at the racetrack. So it's come a long ways, and I think it's just a tool like anything else. I always say we had rotary phones at one time, and now we have iPhones. So are we going to go back to rotary phones because nobody can figure out the iPhone? No, everybody's going to figure out the iPhone. We all want to be equal, so we all need to go back to the rotary phone. How about everybody just learn the iPhone?
That's a good
right.
analogy. Very good.
Hey, Richard, a couple of weeks ago, we had Keith McCarty on, and we had a brief discussion with him about this, where we actually think that it's a little bit of a detriment now that these teams don't have super sport teams as well, like they did back in the day, where, even as recent as Cameron and Garrett coming up through Graves' 600 team to the Superbike team. And then now, like your team, for example, doesn't have a semi next door that's got a couple of kids racing super sport bikes, so you can monitor their progress and know who you're going to pick for the next Superbike guy. Do you agree with that? Do you see that as being somewhat of an issue in today's climate? Absolutely.
I think that is a problem, and as the bikes evolve, they may come out with a new class to replace 600s at some point, because it seems like Kawasaki's got a big bore 600 that doesn't really quite fit with the other 600s, and then Yamaha announced that they're going to discontinue the R6 at some point. They're going to run out their stock. And so I think they're going to come out with some new classes that might be matching classes. Not Moto 2 style, but I bet it's going to be various triples and 4-cylinders and things like that. And maybe the manufacturers get back into it. The problem is that without the manufacturer involvement wholeheartedly, it's hard to get that entry-level team established where the manufacturers trust who they're going to put on a Superbike. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's almost the same thing for World Superbike. Like I was talking to team manager Andrea over there at World Superbike, and he said that they have a hard time picking from the national series if they're not aligned rules-wise with their series, because we were talking about the whole ECU thing and potential future rules and things like that when that whole thing went down in the end of last year. And he said, that they hardly even look at BSB because they don't feel like they can put a guy from that bike onto their bike and bang, go like stink right away. Because let's say the World Supersport bikes have more electronics on them than the BSB bikes. And so it's a better choice to come through that World Supersport package and go up to World Superbike. So it's hard for someone to jump from a national series if we're not totally aligned and the guys aren't getting educated properly, and then so on down the road. You know, one of my interests is maybe having a junior team where you have guys in Superstock or Superbike, entry-level Superbike, let's say, and they're able to learn for that year, then move up to our team if this thing goes longer than next year, let's say.
Richard, I want to continue with this Pandora's box thing a little bit.
Sure.
And this is sort of with cost ideas too. It seems like most racing organizations around the world, including MotoAmerica, are always trying to figure out ways to keep the playing field level among the teams and riders, and also try to get the costs in its, under control. And there has been some talk about possibly a control ECU for everybody, and you guys use a Morelli system that's pretty advanced, and with your knowledge of being able to handle that, obviously, I don't know if I would say probably it's an advantage because you guys know how to handle it and have a good system. But where are you at with the idea of having a kit ECU or a control ECU for everybody? Just let's focus on Superbike for right now.
Okay, so we already have that. Basically, the Morelli box is the whole SKS system is €8,000. That's a pretty small price for an advanced electronic system, and the only way that's happening is because the manufacturers in the World Superbike decided they were going to help fund the lesser teams with these nice systems, and they can provide the technology down. So if you got an SKS system, let's say you were a professional team getting into MotoAmerica, you can go to Yamaha and say, look, I'm serious, here it is. I want to get these SKS systems. You'll get, like Westby did, you'll get a system and you'll get all the maps, the latest development, and they're supposed to, according to the rules of World Superbike, they're supposed to give you an update mid-season as well as far as the base settings go. And then it's up to you to go out and trim the bike, much like you would on a kit box, which is, let's say a kit harness is about $1,100 or so, $1,000, and let's say the ECU is $1,000, so $2,000. But you have no sensors, no data, so it's a little bit harder to decipher what the rider is telling you without the information straight in front of you to double check what he's saying. But you can go out and race at the low level. If you're an entry guy, you can go out and race with a kit box, which is legal, for $2,000. And then as you learn, you can go into one of these SKS systems later on, which is, like I said, fully factory supported. If you go to a control box like a Motec, like BSB uses with no strategies, first of all, there's no torque control. So everything is throttle versus RPM. So that means that somebody smart, I wouldn't say I'm smart, but somebody like smarter than me maybe can go and they can figure out how to turn that into a torque-based system by doing the math on the back end on spreadsheets and things like that, introducing torque tables and converting them to throttle and putting them in for every single racetrack. You don't think those guys are going to have a huge advantage compared to someone who can just plug in a box from World Superbike that already has really good torque-based settings? And so I think that it's a little bit of a misunderstanding as to how much work is required to make a non-closed loop system more user-friendly, especially in the wet. So guys like me and smarter are going to be able to take that open loop system and make it super good for the wet, super good for the dry, and the other guys are going to struggle worse. Because even in the kit box, you have torque-based system, which has settings on the back end that tell the engine how much power to produce in any particular type of situation. So that's a kit box. That's how your street bike comes nowadays. You buy a street bike, you're going to get a torque-based system, unless it's some Ninja 400 with a cable throttle. In that case, you don't have any power anyway. And so that's the reality of it. I think it's a misconception as far as the price goes as well. By the time you add up all the sensors and things individually, which is the way they sell it, the Motec box, the Motec dash, all the sensors, it's the same price within, let's say, €500. So you're not really saving any money on the front end. The harnesses are going to be the same amount of work. You're not saving any money on harnesses, and you're not saving any money on the data guy, because the data guy has to be even smarter using those systems than a guy who is just trimming a base package is good. Now, on the other end, if the base package is crap, then you'll struggle a bit. But most of the manufacturers have that stuff pretty dialed in. And the problem is the manufacturers are not willing to go in and reset up some foreign ECU system, because they've been involved with the Morelli thing for so long that they have really good packages for those. They don't have the time, the investment, the manpower to go through and help develop some foreign system like that. So BSP does it on their own. I don't think they're badly funded. I don't think the guys in that paddock are stupid. So I think the racing is tight for whatever reason. It might be some reasons different than ours. I think the cost of going BSP racing is lower than ours because the travel time. I mean, that whole island is the size of it's small in California. So if you had like a 6-race series in California, how cheap would that be for us? You know, it'd be super cheap. We wouldn't have to fly anybody anywhere. You just drive to all of them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the advantage they have on us. And I don't know about their television. I know MotoAmerica is doing really great with TV and exposure and all that. So I think that's the key to bringing the cost down. It isn't going to be bringing the cost down. I think it's going to be able to raise all the teams up from the value of MotoAmerica. You know, if we can bring the value of MotoAmerica up, which I think they're doing a great job doing, we all just have to, you know, hold on for a little while longer and see if the sponsorship comes, and that's what I think will help. With sponsorship money, you can hire people that are from the World Superbike paddock to come help you with the electronics or whatever, and be in touch with what the world guys are doing, and then that gives us a feeder system into the World Series as well.
Yeah. So I've got one other question related to this, and I have to ask you this one because I did a little bit of homework on this, or a little bit of research. Very little, by the way, so I don't want you to think that I went too far with it. But since you're a Morelli, you have a Morelli system that you use as a customer of Morelli, and you had mentioned Motec, which is what they use in BSB. So Morelli has a system, the REX system, which is a lower cost, and I don't know if it's right or not, but it seems like it's more on par with that Motec system. So is that REX system a possibility to use across the board because it is less expensive as an option?
Well, I think it has the same capability or very close as to the MLE 240 that we're running now. So it uses the same software. I'm sure the factories will be able to develop similar tools. Like we have an Excel tool. It's basically Excel based. We punch all of our settings in there and then export that into the box. So and it's like 4 tabs. It made the thing totally simple compared to the 1,000 tables that are on the back end of the Morelli. The REX is going to be a similar type situation. It's just that I think the box itself is maybe half the price of the MLE 240. So I think it really makes it a little bit cheaper for the manufacturers to get it out there. It looks like a more production unit than like a race only unit. It has a couple of limitations, not really big deals, like not as many lambdas, but you know, anybody with a dyno can tune those things before you get the racetrack. So I think that'd be a good middle level. Like I think it'd be stupid to get rid of, if you want to keep the guys in the sport, I think it'd be stupid to get rid of the kit box and mandate a higher price box. Because then what happens is the guys at the low end, they're just coming off a super stock. They have to get a harness that's custom built. They have to get an ECU. They have to learn it. It makes it very hard for them. A kit box, it has settings. You just go out and run it. You get your feet wet, and then build your bike as you go. I think that's the way our series is. You build as you go, and you hold on to equipment for many years. You don't change them all the time. So I think the rules need to not change for many years as well, because the equipment doesn't. You know, so I think that's a good mid-level box. But like I say, you know, are you going to mandate that someone doesn't have a better paint job than you because it costs $3,000 versus $800? You know, so at what point do you stop saying that the guys with the money can't spend it just because they can? You know, like if you can use a lower priced box, why not just use it? Right. Don't make everyone buy something just because this guy doesn't have any money and that guy does, especially if they perform the same.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm cutting you both off.
Is that it? Yeah, we talked about this stuff.
Your allotted time slot has passed, and we're being fined as we speak. So,
Okay.
Richard, I appreciate you joining us. It was very informative as always, and I'll try not to be as scared of you anymore. Sean, thanks for joining in and asking him some good questions. It was good to get into that electronics package story, even though I'm not sure our tech people are gonna like listening to it because you opened up a can of worms. But anyway, thanks to it's okay. Thanks to both of you for joining, and Happy New Year's to you both. And I know, Sean, you've got a little something to say here at the end.
Yeah, thanks again, Richard, for being on with us. We'll definitely have you on again and get into some even other questions, because we can always ask more. I can for sure, but I just want to end it by letting the fans know out there that tomorrow we're going to have a new promotion starting for tickets. We've got we're going to have 20% off on select tickets and events for our 2021 season. That the offer is good at Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta, Virginia International Raceway, Pittsburgh International Race Complex, New Jersey Motorsports Park, Barber Motorsports Park, and WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. And like I said, it's 20% off. It'll start tomorrow. You'll see some promos on our social media about it. Actually, what am I saying? Today we're recording on Thursday. It's already started, because when you guys hear this podcast, it'll be on Saturday. Sorry about that. It's already going on. So put in the code Early Bird go to the MotoAmerica website tickets and put in the code Early Bird when you buy your tickets, and you'll get 20% off at those select rounds. So make that happen and join us this season for what's going to be, as Richard said, probably one of the most competitive seasons, certainly in MotoAmerica, if not AMA Superbike history. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank